I was so lucky early in my career. I didn't know that these were leaders of movements, but they were. My friend in Poland, Victor Kulerski, had risked his life, and it's a horrific story going back to World War II and all the rest with his family. But he was a movement leader as part of the Solidarity movement. And my friend John Abbott was a movement leader in the United Kingdom. And Chester Finn, I don't know if he'd want to be called a movement leader, but he's sort of been a movement leader. Those are my three primary mentors in my formative years. And it just became, I want to be like them.
You're listening to the Bold by Choice podcast with Vashaunta Harris and Jim Goenner, where we ask what school could be and learn from the people brave enough to build it. Powered by the National Charter Schools Institute.
Well, colleagues and friends, welcome back to the Bold by Choice podcast. One of the questions at the heart of this season that we're kind of grappling with is, what does it actually take to build something that lasts and that grows with us? Not just a school, not just an organization, but a system, an ecosystem that creates opportunity for students over time. And so in this mini-series, as Jim and I shared last week, we'll be talking to all of our 2026 award winners for the Bold by Choice. And today we're going to be talking about a very, very special award to us, very special purpose, and a very special colleague and friend.
And Vashaunta, our special guest today is Terry Ryan. Terry is with Bluum in Idaho, and there's quite a story that we want to share with you about that. But we were able to give the Bold by Choice Catalyst Award to the Bluum organization and the J.A. and Catherine Albertson's Family Foundation. And Podcast Nation, you're going to love to hear this story because it's one that you can learn from, but it's one that I hope you can replicate in your own state.
So Terry, one of the things that became so clear in our conversation last week, and I am pumped for the podcast listeners to hear, is that your journey wasn't linear. It was very much shaped by experiences that you had literally all over the world, from teaching in Poland and spending time in the UK, working alongside very prominent politicians, and even finding yourself establishing and helping to build one of the most influential education organizations in Idaho. So we're excited for listeners to hear about your leadership journey. So we'd love to turn it over to you.
Well, Vashaunta, I have to say thank you. And I share a similar story as your own. I have to have my Bold by Choice award here. I'm very proud of it. And sitting here on my desk, I want you guys to know, anytime somebody comes in, the first thing they're going to see is my Bold by Choice award.
I love that.
In terms of the story, you're going to have to interrupt me and guide me. You guys know I like to talk. I've been very fortunate. I was a child of the 80s, and then in 1990, I had a professor. I was going to go to law school. It seemed to be the thing to do. And I had a professor, Wolfgang Schlau. He was a German, and he said, "Hey, there's this thing going on in Poland called World Teach. You'd be really good. You should do it." And I was like, I'd love to travel and do things like that. Long and short of it is I ended up going to Poland. This was through a program managed by a really good group of people out of Harvard, young people. We were all young. I was 22. I think the guy in charge of it was 24, 25. And we were placed in different communities across Poland. There were 34 of us. It was just a great experience. And one, in terms of working with Polish educators in Polish schools to help make the transition from communism to whatever the future was to hold. We still had Russian jets flying over the school, and they'd break the sound barrier and rattle the windows. They wanted you to know they were still there. And so it was just an amazing opportunity to be part of a time of change and optimism and really a hope for a better world. And Poland is, in the last 35 plus years, has just really become an amazing success story. And I met a number of outstanding young Americans who had committed themselves to a year or two of being in Poland. I came back to the United States. I went to graduate school at the University of Denver, and then I went back to Poland in 1994, 95. And there it was more, I was still working as a teacher, but it was a very different experience. It wasn't a village and it wasn't a regular Poles. It was more sort of working in one of the elite high schools in Warsaw. It's called the Goethe Institute. And these were students who'd already learned English, but it was more about refining and really getting into debates on issues, being able to communicate. They all wanted to go to a university in the United States or a university in the United Kingdom or somewhere else where English was really a needed part of what they were doing. And I was also involved and met an amazing man called Victor Kulersky, who had been a member of Solidarity. His family had been in the resistance for really over 100 years. And he became a dear friend and mentor to me. At some point he said, we need to do a conference in Poland on the future of education. And here's my Rolodex, basically. And it was people like Chester Finn and Diane Ravitch and Al Shanker and people like that from the United Kingdom, from Israel, from Germany. It was a who's who of sort of civics education across the world. And we put together a conference and it brought together members of parliament. It brought together the leadership of Poland. An American embassy was involved. We raised money from the American embassy, British Stiftungs, I'm sorry, German Stiftungs and British Council and so forth and so on. And it was a big event. And it was a transformative event for civic education in Poland. And it was a good deal for me because I met amazing people. And when I was coming back to the United States, I had Al Shanker, saying, hey, would you be interested in
Wow.
working with the American Federation of Teachers? And I had Chester Finn talking about opportunities with him downstream. And an Englishman, John Abbott, actually was like, hey, I'm doing this stuff across the world. Maybe you want to work with me. And it was exciting. And then at that point, I was just getting married. I was very fortunate to be able to travel a lot all over with John Abbott, who's an amazing British educator. And then September 11th happened. I had young children. I then needed to more kind of hunker down in a particular spot. And being an American, that was the United States. And I reached out to the man I had great respect for, Chester Finn, and I said, Checker, I don't think it's a good time for me to be moving my young family to the United Kingdom. Do you have any ideas on maybe some opportunities? And he said, yeah, I got this thing going on in Ohio. And you're a Midwest guy, and maybe this is something that'd be of interest to you. And you'll need to spend some time in Ohio, but our office is in DC. So I became part of the Thomas B. Fordham Foundation, Thomas B. Fordham Institute, and I was there for 12 years. And we were involved in becoming an authorizer, and that's how I met Jim when I was like tasked with figuring out should we become an authorizer and how would you do that in the state of Ohio. I was told you got to go talk to Jim Goenner in Michigan. You got to go talk to our friends at the mayor's office in Indianapolis, and you got to go talk to Susie Miller in New York. Those are the places you got to go study if you're going to do authorizing. And so that was my introduction to this idea of being a public charter school authorizer. Fordham, God bless him, got into it. That was its own journey and was great fun helping to navigate. The team at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute and Foundation are outstanding, and I have great respect and admiration for them to this day, and they're my friends. I was recruited by the J.A. and Catherine Albertson's Family Foundation 13 years ago now to come to Idaho to help launch what they had a vision of 20,000 new school seats in 10 years. That was pretty much it. There was a vision. There wasn't really a script on how we're going to get there. I think initially we thought, well, we'd talk to the large networks across the country, BASIS and KIP and go down the list. And none of them really wanted to come to Idaho at that time. The per pupil funding is the lowest in the country here. We always battle Utah for the lowest per pupil funding. And there isn't the scale. We don't have large like a Columbus, Ohio, or a big place where you can plop down a model and get 4,000 or 5,000 kids enrolled. And so quickly we came to realize this is going to have to be a homegrown initiative. Now, we might be able to recruit talent to come and be a part of what we're doing, but really this was going to be an Idaho-based thing with mostly Idaho-based educators. And what we've done is we've built networks with tremendous educators, most of them from Idaho, a couple we've recruited from out of state, military guys in particular, through the Hillsdale Barney Charter School Initiative. We have a group here called American Classical Schools of Idaho. Our fellowship early on, we had two fellows who are career tech educators, outstanding educators. They've launched a model called Elevate Academies. We're up to, I don't know, 4 or 5 Elevate Academies. They serve 100% at-risk students, and they're doing great things. And we've got Gym Prep Innovation Schools. They were an online school. They now have 7 brick and mortar schools. Well, I mentioned to you the American Classical Schools of Idaho, and we had other schools that were doing well, but they needed help to go from like 400 kids to 1,000 kids. And so, between kind of developing our own network of schools, and we did that primarily through what we call the Idaho New School Fellowship. I could go down that rabbit hole if you want, but it's all about talent. I think that's the main thing. It's about values, it's about talent, and it's about collaboration. I mean, those are the things that really, in your introduction, you asked like kind of what has worked for us here, and having a tremendous funder and supporter in the J.A. and Catherine Albertson's Family Foundation, who has been committed to this now for 12 years. We were also very lucky to tap into the Federal Charter School Program Grant. We were one of the first nonprofit organizations. We applied in 2017. There were 2 nonprofits, state entity groups that applied, one in Oklahoma, us in Idaho. Oklahoma got it. We didn't. Best thing that happened to us was us not getting it, because we learned a ton about what we needed to really be able to do and think better about. And so to have to reapply, and we got it in 2018, was a good thing. And we've built systems and processes over the last 8 years. We received a second CSP grant in 2023 after successfully administering the first one, which was about $22 million. And we've also managed a smaller grant for credit enhancement. That's a pretty nifty tool too. And then we've had great support from the Charter School Growth Fund, New Schools Venture Fund, and locals, people donating land, people donating steel. So it's been a kind of an all hands on deck. And our sort of, let's call it the policy community here, and our lawmakers are very supportive of public charter schools, school choice more generally. They're not big at giving you money, but they're really good about providing flexibility and creative solutions to things like refinancing under the state's credit rating, and nifty things like that. And so we've had great support really across the board in the state of Idaho. And we've had excellent people who've been wanting to be involved in opening these schools. And we've had school districts that have been really good partners with us also. This hasn't been as hostile here as it was in Ohio when I was there. And so really a lot of good things came together. I was very fortunate to come here when I did and to get the support I did. And I've just been able to be a catalyst, but I count my blessings every day.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh my gosh, there's so much packed into that story. And I want to start with something, Terry, we talked about the other day. One of the things we were laughing about as we shared both of our stories and journeys in education is that this is people work. And one of the things that I love about when you're like, all right, we've got 20 and 10, and like, we know what the campaign is, we know what the charge is, but we got to figure out how we get there. And you all started thinking first about the talent. You started thinking first about the people. Who are the people that we want to bring in to lead these schools, but also who are the folks we want to partner with and collaborate with so that we build this as a bit of a community model. And I think that's so important.
I totally agree with that. And I would add one more thing, and I'll start here. It's who you surround yourself with. So, I saw in Ohio some bad situations where money was misspent and people went to jail and that sort of thing. And so I quickly came to learn that, academic malfeasance is a bad thing, but you don't go to jail for it. Maybe you should. But fiscal malfeasance, people go to jail. So one of the first things I needed to do was get a really high quality chief financial officer, somebody who could help manage the money, make sure it's being spent the way it's supposed to be spent. So one of the best hires I made was Mark Kerrigan, my CFO. And then quickly came to understand we needed expertise around facilities. Now, we had a partner here called Building Hope that Albertsons brought in at the same time, but we needed capacity on our own team. There's a great guy who was a lawyer, and then he started to help run a charter school named Keith Donahue. He knows the ins and outs of facility financing issues, which is another area you can get in big trouble if you don't know, and
Mm-hmm.
special ed is another area. Jennifer Ribordi, outstanding talent. So those are three big areas where I really knew I needed the best possible talent I could get, because if you mess up any of those areas, you really get into a lot of trouble. And then, yeah, then the talent for the schools, bringing in great talent. And, you spend maybe a year or two helping them get going, and then they're off and running. And they don't really need that much more from you, other than maybe some help around the finance side of things, around navigating the charter facility financing. And as we got deeper into this and we learned, we realized that we needed to also impact the conversations at the legislature, because we needed some help from them. There were
Mm.
certain things, like we still had charter schools that were having 3-year contracts as if they were district schools. And it's like, wait a minute, charter schools should be more like a at-will kind of place than you get a 3-year contract. And then there was a lot of baggage around who you could hire as school administrators, who you could hire as teachers. And so we had to get flexibility, especially around the leadership stuff. We
Mm-hmm.
had a U.S. colonel who had been running a great school in Atlanta through the Barney Charter School Initiative, wanted to come here. And he's like, I'm not jumping through all the hoops that you guys got. So we had to get the law changed to allow high performing professionals, and we've got criteria around what that looks like, to come in and be able to run a public charter school. I mean, he taught at the Monterey Institute. He'd been in the Pentagon. I mean, he'd led, he'd been a leader of men and women. And I was like insane that he needed to go back for 2 years. And so
Yeah.
and the lawmakers, God bless them, they understood it. They agreed. I kind of always laughingly called it the Stephen Lambert law. But after Steve, we'd had a number of really talented people get into our school's leadership, including through our fellowship. And it's not like letting everybody in who wants to come in. It's a high standard. You have to have 5 years of professional experience. You have to have at least a BA. And so we're trying to bring the best people that we can possibly bring into our schools. And then we've had great partners. Marcia Aarons from the Charter School Growth Fund. Not only have they been a partner in terms of like helping with financing the back office and things like that of some of our schools, she brings a ton of experience and expertise that she's part of our board, the Bluum board, the Idaho Charter School Association board, Vectra Bank, the guy who was the leader of the efforts for Vectra Bank in our state. He's now on our board. He's retired. Building Hope, I mentioned to you, Joe Bruno, Building Hope, he is on our board. So it really has been a collection of outstanding talent from the governance level to the makeup of the team. I have to mention Amy Hukkinen, who's been running our CSP work. She's a systems kind of expert guru and has built, our systems that have managed our federal CSP program successfully. So this is all about talent. It's all about, again, I'm going to say it's talent who are organized around shared values and the shared belief that, look, we need to do better by our children and our families deserve better schools. Not that we're trashing the schools that are currently here, but we need to evolve and we need to get better and we need to be smarter and we need to get different thinking and different sorts of people into the space of education. And we've done all that and we're seeing results. We're seeing, our public charter schools as a sector outperform state averages. You start breaking it across our charter schools, across communities. Inevitably, the top, if you look at the top 5 schools in a community, 2 or 3 of them are going to be public charter schools.
Vashaunta, what I love about that is we talk about catalysts. They spark change, they accelerate progress. And you just heard Terry talk about all the different partners, right? This was bringing people together with expertise, with passion, with commitment around a shared cause, right? And that's the other thing a catalyst does. They help lay out that vision, they bring people around it, and they make things happen. So Terry, I want to go back and I want the podcast nation to listen to this. Idaho passed its charter school law in 1998.
Yeah.
You started at Bluum in year
2013.
Okay, so more than 10 years later, there wasn't a lot going on in Idaho,
No, there wasn't. There were some
right?
brave souls out there doing some
And
brave things,
and
but no, it
here's
wasn't
right,
much.
some brave souls doing some great things, but not a lot of things going on. Albertsons comes in and says, "Hey, we got to change the game. Lay out a vision, recruit talent. They pick you." But now you look 20 years later, Idaho is at the top of the class. Like, you're blazing trails. And that's what I want everybody listening. Whether you love your charter law or you don't like your charter law, you've got an opportunity to do a reset. And this is an example of how to do that. And so I want you to tell them the story, Terry, about the name Bluum.
Oh, yeah.
Where did that come from and how did you live into it?
Well, so working with the Albertsons Family Foundation, I was very fortunate that they would introduce me to really good like marketing people, the best in the state of Idaho. And I had this vision of the Idaho New School Network or something like that. I wasn't being very creative. And they said, you got to go talk to these folks who do really good branding work, right? And so I went and I explained to them kind of the vision of where we were going. And they said, we get what you're saying. This is exciting. It makes a whole bunch of sense. Give us, a month to come back with 3 or 4 ideas for you. And they came back with names. And it was really interesting because there was nothing in there about charter schools. There was nothing in there about charter school networks. And so they had this idea of Bluum. And I was like, Bluum, what exactly is that? And they're like, well, you can define what Bluum is. That's the whole point of this. You're not fixed. As soon as you put charter school in the name or network or association or whatever it is, you've narrowed what you can be. And so with Bluum, it gives you maximum capacity to define what you want to be. And so let learning grow became our tagline. And then Bluum, it was great because I had the freedom to go out and define Bluum. First thing people would ask you is, what's Bluum? Well, let me tell you what Bluum is, all right? And I could like really give a good story, and I wasn't stuck in any past or any legacy things. It was really the opportunity to do things from scratch. I owe the Albertsons Family Foundation a huge thank you for a bunch of stuff, but that's certainly one of them. The creativity around the name. It wasn't like, this is the name you must have. It was go and really work with people who are really smart about this and figure out a name that can work for you over the long haul that fits the values that you want to espouse. And leadership has always been a pivotal part of what we do. Our Idaho New School Fellowship pipeline, I think we're up to 38 fellows that we've brought in. They get to spend a year or two planning their schools. And it's been an outstanding way to launch and grow our public charter school network in Idaho.
So Vashaunta, what I want everybody to hear is that's the difference between leadership and management.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a distinction. And I'd say great leaders also know how to manage, but leading is the first requisite.
I'm a better leader than I am a manager. I mean, and it's like, I don't really like managing, but you have to do it. But like seeing things, that's why having really good people around you who can help you with the management part of this is really important. Management is important, and management can get you in trouble if you don't do it right. But you don't change the world through management. You change the world through leadership.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, Vashaunta, back to you, but I want to just quote that one. Catalysts start with a vision. They don't start with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
Martin Luther King started with a dream. He didn't start with a plan. And I think that's good advice for all of us. We've got to have a compelling vision that brings people together.
Oh, well, I completely agree. Yeah. And Terry, one thing I'd love for us for a moment, if we can go down the rabbit hole and talk about how you all kind of started with the New Schools Fellowship for Idaho. I really love the story that you were sharing with us in our prep time. So can you kind of set the stage for our listeners What did those first couple of years look like? How did you expand the net, right, and reach out across the entire nation to kind of share this vision? And then I'd love to talk about the growth, right? Those first two leaders, and now you're at 38. So I'd
Yeah.
love to like expand upon that
Yeah.
story.
So, well, I mentioned to you a little bit earlier, the idea that you would just bring in networks of schools and they would come and do great things didn't fit Idaho. And so we realized it was about talent. And my friends from Indianapolis, I worked in Dayton for 10 years. I got to know what was going on with the mine trust in Indianapolis and all the great things going on there. And so I have to give credit to studying what they were doing, building excellent schools. It's all about talent. All right. So all of that, the Kip Fisher Fellowship, all of that I knew and appreciated greatly. And so quickly came to realize we needed something similar, but it needed to be kind of an Idaho version of things. So we put together the first kind of public fellowship opportunity, and it was a national thing that we sent out. I think we had like 44 applicants from 13 different states. And had some really good people from within Idaho. Superintendents of some of our larger districts, which shocked me. And it was fun
Wow.
to talk to them and say, "Hey, what's up?" And they're like,
Right.
I've always had this vision of a school, and I want to do it. And this would be a great opportunity for me to do it. I'm managing a district; it's good work. I'm making a difference, but I'd love to do a X, Y, or Z type school. That was a fascinating thing. There's sort of a liberation aspect to it, and more on that in a minute. But so we put together a group, five of us who were going to go through the resumes and get it down. We were going to get one fellow. We had a partnership. I had spoken to Richard Barth and the folks at KIP and said, could we, if we get a really talented person, could they go through the Kip Fisher Fellowship program? uh, Understanding you guys aren't going to open a KIP school in Idaho, and you're not going to vouch for them as a KIP school, but the Fisher Fellowship is best in class, and we'd love to have our fellow go through the KIP Fisher Fellowship. And they were like, yeah, if the person is of a quality that we feel like they'll fit in and
Mhm.
it can be an effective part of the cohort that we're putting together, yeah, sure. And so that I had to go out and then kind of as the resumes were coming in, we were finding really talented younger educators who'd gone through the TFA, and then they were in like a KIP school. One guy, outstanding young man, he's now in Michigan, by the way, but he was at the original KIP school in Houston, and he applied and he wanted to come to Idaho. And so I reached out to his boss at the school, and they were like, he's about 2 years from being ready to run a charter school. I said, listen, in 2 years, he's not going to come to Idaho. So I need to get him here. We'll take a risk. And if he's early, that's fine. But we'll get him through the Kip Fisher Fellowship and he'll come. And then Amanda Cox was the second one that we got. And she came from South Carolina, and she was in the kind of the leadership team of Teach for America down in South Carolina, had also spent some time in a KIP school. So we brought those, we couldn't pick between the two of them. So we brought two of them together and said, could you guys work together to launch a school, with the understanding if you do it well, then you can do a network and all these things. So those were our two first fellows. And our third and fourth fellows were administrators currently working in Idaho, Matt Strong and Monica White. They had vision of a really good career tech model that they simply couldn't do within a traditional school district at that time in Idaho.
Mhm.
And to their credit, they came and said, we don't really like you. We don't really like charter schools, but we think there might be an opportunity to do something really cool here. Right? They were very honest, and I adore them. And I was like, well, but understand what charter schools are. And we had to go through all of that kind of like, dating and all that. They finally got it and they embraced it. They took 2 years to put together a model, which ultimately became Elevate Academies. And it's an outstanding charter school network now that serves 100% at-risk students and is operating. Gosh, they're at 4 buildings now, and they're going to have a fifth in the next year or two. And they have school districts that are saying, "Come, we'll help you get a facility. You guys are doing things we can't do. You can do it better than we can do it. So they were really well regarded traditional educators who saw the opportunity to do something innovative. Roger Quarles had been their boss. Roger Quarles was then at the foundation, introduced us. So they had that sort of trusting relationship with somebody they really admired in Roger. And so, okay, Roger said, you should talk to Terry. And that led to them running a network of really outstanding schools, doing good things and making a difference for some of our neediest kids.
Vashaunta, I've been able to go to their Nampa campus, and they've got a slide in the school, and I've got video of Terry going down it. But I'll tell you, the shine in those kids' eyes and how proud of what they were doing, their school, having visitors come. And Terry, one of the kids had built, kid, I say kid, young adult, he had built a guitar.
He'd welded it, and I mean, it was really cool. And Wes Olson, one of our colleagues, who's an investment banker, played it. Remember, it was really neat. And it was just a neat moment to connect with the kid. But the young man was able to see that something he'd had a vision and something that he had created, others got excited about. And that's what gets people when people feel appreciated and they feel like what they're doing matters and people get excited when they learn what they're doing. That's how you become that's how you grow and become a leader. And so there's just a moment of spark there. And it's so much fun because you have those moments, Jim. And that was a really good one.
They were racing cars,
Yep.
That they'd crafted out of wood. I mean, it was just a phenomenal experience.
They weren't even open that day. Those kids came there because we were going there.
That's one of our themes. Do you got to go to school or you get to go to school?
Mm-hmm.
And there you saw kids that get to go to school and they loved it.
Yeah. And they loved bragging about their school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that you both kind of helped me understand, and Terry, I hope I'm quoting this correctly. If I don't, please help me fix it. But you were talking about in Idaho, like even what some of us may think of as the metropolitan area or the downtown, like even that can still be seen as more rural in your state. And so I wanted us to talk a little bit about how does that impact the work if you have a lot of rural communities? How have you all approached that?
Right. And so to start, Idaho is the most remote state in the lower 48, meaning that like if to drive from Boise to another big city, be it Salt Lake City or Portland or Seattle, you're going 6, 7, 8 hours to get there. So, you guys know in Michigan, you go 2 hours, or Ohio, you go 2 hours, and you're from one big city to the next. So the sort of the sprawling nature of Idaho, you have to kind of get your mind around it. And so a lot of it from the rest of the country's perspective is rural. So here we talk about rural and remote. So, you can use National Center for Education statistics and look at like what rural is. And I forget some of the schools that are rural here really don't feel rural in an Idaho perspective, because they might be in a community of 12,000 people. Well, in the rest of the country, all right, I guess that is still kind of rural. So the rural and the remote part of this, we've done a lot of work with rural communities and rural public charter schools. And it's really hard to do because you don't have scale. And you're very dependent on the talent that is available to you there. And there are people who've been fourth, fifth generation, love their community. They know the school is critical to the continuation of the community as a legitimate place. And so it's hard work, driven by people who care deeply about that particular place. And we've had some successes. And then I'll give you an example. Jim and Sue Smith. Jim Smith had been the chief financial officer in Idaho, an outstanding man, a rancher, a deputy sheriff, chief financial officer, state of Idaho's Department of Education, superintendent. His wife was an outstanding educator. And so they had a vision of doing a school in what would be remote Idaho called the Upper Carmen Public Charter School. And for about 12 years, they ran a great school. The for 4 years running, the valedictorian at the high school, the district high school, had started their educational journey at their school. They were outstanding. Now, as they got older and started having health issues and things and trying to transition and find, another leader for the school, literally the school was on their property. And they drove the buses, they did everything. They proved irreplaceable. And so when they faded out, the school faded out, and then the kids have either gone back to the district, or there was another charter school that opened up in Salmon, which is the town nearby. And we're working now at a place called Hollister, which is almost it's at the Nevada Idaho border, very again remote, and a passionate community there. And we've got partnerships we're helping develop for them. Lava Hot Springs is another one in Southeast, and I could go on. Bonners Ferry up north. I think what we're trying to do, and I think what we're seeing and makes sense in the long run here, is some sort of tethering of these rural charter schools to a network partner, so that they can get some scale, they can get some expertise. Special ed, for example. I mean, we're doing some of that at the Bluum level now. So it's a different way of doing it. And a number of these schools are buildings that the districts were going to shut down. And they're like, it's easier for us to just bus the kids 15, 20 miles each way than it is to continue operating that building. So they're like, and they've been good they're like, if you guys think you can make it work, we'll give you a deal on the building and see if you can make it work. And truly, we're in the process of figuring out, can we make it work? And what does make it work look like? I mean, if we can give 15 years to that building, to that school, to that community that otherwise wouldn't be there, that's a success, isn't it? I don't know. Does it have to be there for another 100 years? Or does it, if you get 10 years and made a huge difference for all the families that were part of it for 10 years? These are the kinds of things we're grappling. There's no easy answers here as to, we know we're going to be able to support it and it's going to be sustainable and it's going to be there in 20 or 25 years. Now, we make bets with schools in the more urban areas when you help get their facility financed in a 30-year deal, that they'll be there 30 years. The rural ones, it's a trickier one. It's not dissimilar to some of the tougher neighborhoods in Dayton or in Detroit or in Cleveland, where you just don't know if that community is still going to survive in 10, 15 years. And
Terry, I want to press on those tensions a minute. One of our audiences is authorizers. And we fight for authorizers to have professional discretion and judgment because we think that's part of being a professional authorizer. You're raising the tension that, we often talk about excellence and built to last. But a great school for a period of time to serve a purpose that may then go away. You're asking the question, is it a success? I think you're saying it is successful. But how would you encourage others to think about those types of questions that maybe the answer is different than what we've assumed from what we've heard or what we've read? And that we're inventing a new future?
Well, I haven't given that deep a thought to it, Jim. I mean, it's just like, I think, look, you have community people who come to you. They drive here and they say, listen, we don't want this school to close. Can you help us keep it open? Can you help us figure out a way to make it work? And they have tears in their eyes because this school educated them, their parents, their grandparents, and their great-grandparents. And they have pictures on the wall. These people going back to the 1920s. And they're like, this is the heart of our community. And if it goes, our community's done. Take a risk with us. And so we do. But if there's people there we believe that you can take the risk of investing in, and they're going to give it their all to make it work. and that they're committed to this, and that, we can help them with the back office. We can help them make sure that they're doing the special ed because we have that capacity here. A lot of this stuff is also made possible now because of things like Zoom, where you're able to provide the support and the assistance and not have to drive 3 hours to get there. So I think we do need to, and we're not building new buildings. We're taking over the existing buildings. We may need to make some updates to them. So we're not saying, we want to go in these small rural communities and invest $10 million in a building.
Yep.
So there's a limitation to the partners we work with. Is, do you have a facility? Because that's really important. And if you have a facility and it's in pretty good shape and we can help update it, this matters, by the way, greatly to our funder, the J. Ann Catherine Albertson's Family Foundation. They care deeply about all of Idaho, and a lot of Idaho is rural. And so they've encouraged us to take these risks. By the way, I have to say this. The U.S. Department of Education and the Federal Charter School Program Grant also wants us to take this risk. They've said, can you figure out how to try and make rural charter schools work? And honestly, yes, we're going to give it the best shot we can. We're going to, and again, partnering up. So we've got a network, a real strong network in Idaho Falls called Alturas. Can they provide the technical assistance on the academic model part of this? They do things like you have joint kind of, I'm not going to get the right education terminology, I apologize, but you have first graders, second graders, and third graders together in one classroom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we've got models like that in our state that are doing really good things. And so these are really good models to plug into a more rural space where you might have 8 first graders, 12 second graders, and 11 third graders. All of a sudden, that's enough to have one classroom teacher, a teacher's aide. All of this stuff has to be reconfigured, reconceptualized, which, by the way, the charters are able to do quicker, more nimbly, and with less static than the districts can do. Because if you're a district, you got to worry about that school as it fits into the larger, and you're busting kids at 6th grade or 7th grade and all that stuff. This is just like, how do you make this building work for this community and these kids and get maximum return on it?
Vashaunta, I can envision Ted Coldery listening to this and smiling, because he just described the institutional innovation of chartering.
Yes.
And that one size doesn't fit all, and it gives you this flexibility of how do you govern and organize and operate public education. So Terry, I'm going to take one more step, the remote, right? Because most of America is rural geographically.
Mm-hmm.
And then beyond that is remote. And I want to link that to learning, right? Because we often think of schools, school facilities, school operations, fire drills, all of that. But the real key is learning. Where do you see learning in schools, and what's the future of that look like, particularly when you're thinking about remote and facilities are probably off the table?
Right. So we've got a group here called Gym Prep, and they started out as an online school 18 years ago. And then they built a cluster of high-performing schools that is their network. And about 3 years ago, they started looking into what they call learning societies. Others talk about micro schools. And fascinating, because I was actually talking to a guy who's working with the 15 bishops in Texas, and they're trying to figure out, how do we bring Catholic education to the remote parts of Texas? And so it's just fascinating. Like, we're just starting down this path. Gym Prep is starting down this path. We got another model, American Classical Schools of Idaho. So you might have 20 to 30, maybe 40 kids. But they're part of the Gym Prep network, and that Gym Prep has an online school. In our state, they have a statewide LEA. So the students anywhere in the state can enroll into the statewide LEA, and then the funding flows that way. But then they're actually in maybe the basement of a VFW, or maybe they're in classroom space that a local church in a community uses on weekends, but doesn't use it all during the week, or maybe in a business basement with a couple classrooms. I mean, they're pretty flexible in thinking about where the kids are, and then they'll have a a leader that's called the instructional leader for that cohort of students, and they're playing around with the model. But I think they're like saying, we'll do K6, and we can do some really good things, and then they'll move on to a brick and mortar school or a virtual school at grade 7 and onwards. But if you can get them young and you can do some really good things, and you have a high quality instructional experience for these families. And what's really neat is every time I go and visit, there's moms that are there wanting to be a part of it, or dads that are there that want to be a part of it, volunteers. So it's a brick and mortar experience, but it's deeply connected to an existing online model that they'll participate. They have this concept of earned autonomy, where you may have you go and have direct instruction, and the building leader, the instructional leader in the building, his or her job is to say, I need a cohort of 5 of you because you're all struggling with your fractions. And we're going to sit down and you'll see them in a circle with 5 students, and they'll be working using flashcards or using things we'd have recognized in the 70s and 80s. But you'll also have kids who will be sitting in a monitor interacting and taking an online course that students across the state of Idaho are taking with them at the same time. Or it can be synchronous or asynchronous. So the use of learning tools and the power that they have in the rural space, but it's not just putting kids in front of a computer. It's having an educational leader, an instructional leader who understands the model, who understands what the opportunities are through the portal of learning opportunities. And then you have families who are engaged in this as well. And so what we're seeing is this version of micro schooling. It's drawn homeschoolers back into a more traditional learning environment, because they feel like it works for their kids. It's not too big, it's not too remote. They're not teaching things that they don't believe in. So you're creating opportunities here. Like I say, it's fascinating. I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman working with the Catholic schools in Texas. They want to figure this out because they're like, there are a bunch of kids across the state of Texas who are Catholics and want Catholic education, but there aren't any schools within, 50 miles of them. So how do you do it? And so I connected him to my friend Jason Bransford, who's doing this work in Idaho. Jim, again, I don't know how this is all going to, play out, what's going to work, what's not going to work. But it's absolutely, and it's neat that here we're doing it under the charter school brand. We're not doing it as part of the education savings account program yet, anyway. That may change in time. Texas, they'll do it under the education savings account, I think is what they call it there. So there's a lot of innovation and things going on here. We all need to pay attention to what's working and what's not. But here, there's the deep belief you do need an adult who knows the instructional model, has to be part of the process. And it's really good when it's a personal thing and the kids are showing up at a place and they're with other kids. And it's not just them working alone in their house. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. You bring up so many great points, and it's so cool to hear like your history and background. Like you spent time with folks like Al Shanker and some of those folks who are lauded as the kind of original thinkers behind chartering, right? And we use that as a verb. And then I love how you're calling out these different examples of we one have to know and understand our community. And so in different words, you're basically saying communities have values also.
Yeah.
And so how do we make sure that in solving a challenge around how their students learn, we can actually be creative about that. We can be innovative about that so that they feel like their values are held true and students still have learning opportunities. I think that is so powerful, and it looks different, right? You described different areas of the state of Idaho, and it looks different because it's serving different purposes.
But there's a tension in all of this work, Vashaunta, and you know it, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I mean, we had a legislative our last legislative process where you're starting to see more sort of statewide, let's call them mandates, which is not how the traditional way things have happened in Idaho. But you're seeing things, and some of this stuff is hard to really think about what's right. The science of reading. Should you mandate that the science of reading has to be utilized in every school across the state? Or do you say, look, the science of reading works, and if we encourage you to look at it and see if it might fit for what you're doing in your charter school or in your community, now we're going to hold you accountable for results through our annual assessments, and we're going to report those districts that are doing well, those schools that are doing well, and those that aren't. Or do you mandate that, listen, this seems to work and it's working well, so why would we have schools that didn't? And I'm not picking on the science of reading, I'm a fan of it. But so, for example, the science of reading, or we may get there with math. And here we had a big debate around civics that all kids need to learn, and it's a long list of things that they need to learn and how they're supposed to learn it. So there's this tension in red states right now between let's really try to empower local communities to innovate and do things well for their kids, or let's find solutions and apply it across the whole state. I'm of the old school, local control, trust but verify. And at the end of the day, there's no one who cares more about the kids than the parents and the community
Absolutely.
where they, and if they don't, then we have bigger problems, right? So I have a hard time with command and control structures. But I also went through, I saw the horrific outcomes in Poland of command and control. And so I guess I'm always going to resist the idea that experts know what's best for every kid in Idaho or any other state. But this is a legitimate tension that's, and I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I very well could be. Maybe we need to be thinking more about in European countries, they have a national curriculum. I think in the United States, not having a state curriculum is a net positive. Well, maybe we should be thinking about a good state curriculum for. I'd turn it over to people smarter than me, like Jim Gunner. Figure it out. Mike Petrilli at Fordham. There are people who are definitely smarter than me. Marguerite Rosa, go down the list.
Hey, Terry, we did a podcast with a guy once, and he was with an organization that was about growing, I think Bluum or something like that. But what he said he did is he surrounded himself with amazing talent.
Yeah.
And great partners. And it seems like, for a weighty question like that, that's exactly what we should do.
Yeah.
We're good at asking questions. We irritate people sometimes. I feel bad because you have friends in the legislature who've done really good things for you, but every now and then they'll go down a path and they'll ask your opinion, and you say, no, don't recommend it. And, and then they don't, they keep doing it anyway. And then I think we have a responsibility. I learned this from Chester Finn. You have a responsibility to speak truth to power, even if it's uncomfortable for them and you. And if you're going to be a leader, and again, I think there's times that you just have to step out and say, hey, does that fit the values? I understand the immediacy and the politics around it, but is that really long-term where we want to go? So there are conversations that need to be had, and we have some level of authority now because of the great partners. I have to be careful because I don't speak just for me. I speak for all the people that we work with, our funders, our school partners. So you have to be really careful what you say and when you say it, but you also not need to shy away from some of the things that just don't feel right.
Yeah.
Vashaunta, I know you need to take us to the finish line, but I got to slide in there. That's right. Well, you just heard the difference between sector thinking and movement thinking.
That's right.
Sectors protect what exists. Movements keep asking the question, how do we make this better? How do we make this better? And that is what is so critical. And that's what leaders bring.
That's right.
I was so lucky early in my career. I didn't know that these were leaders of movements, but they were. My friend in Poland, Victor Kulerski, had risked his life, and it's a horrific story going back to World War II and all the rest with his family. But he was a movement leader as part of the solidarity movement. And my friend John Abbott was a movement leader in the United Kingdom. And Chester Finn, I don't know if he'd want to be called a movement leader, but he's sort of been a movement leader. I mean, those are my three primary mentors in my formative years. And it just became, I want to be like them because they've changed their societies. They've changed their countries for the better. Or if they haven't changed them, they've at least tried. They're at least engaged in the right struggle. And so I think we have a responsibility to try to make the world a little bit better place than what we found. And I still believe that.
Well, Terry, I know we are coming up on our time, and I know I speak for myself. I think I speak for Jim and I. We could not be more excited and grateful to you for taking time out of your really busy schedule to share a bit about your story and the Bluum story and all of your successes with us. So very much appreciated.
Well, thank you so much. At some point we should have another one of these on where we talk about all the failings.
Yes, that's what we learned from. So we definitely do.
We're going to call that the fail forward episode.
Thank you.
It'll probably be the one we go viral on. That's the one you learn from.
Vashaunta, I just want to wrap it up with this. Part of the Catalyst Award, the why behind it, recognizes organizations that do more together than they can do by themselves. And you just heard the story of how that happened and why it happened and why it's so powerful. And Catalyst, they create the spark, but they propel the action and they also stick with it because they're part of the shared vision and values. And this doesn't happen overnight. This is a 20-year journey. And now it's like, well, I want to be Bluum. Well, Bluum started with an idea and a name that didn't mean anything. What turns it to life are people. Mm-hmm. And leadership and talent.
And values, Jim. Shared values.
And that's what you build on is the values. And that's what the glue that holds it together when you're in those tough times, right? Is this living our values? And so just hats off, Terry, to you and the team. I know you'll give the credit to everybody, but your leadership's been a difference maker. And we just can't say enough about this. We want everybody to hear the story. And, the reason for that is recognize excellence, see it repeated, see it spread. That's what we call democratizing excellence here. And we want everybody to have excellent schools and places where their families can grow and raise. And if I might say, bloom.
Well, thank you.
Oh, that was perfect. I don't even know what to say after that. That was beautiful, Jim. Well, friends, we'll be back same time, same station next week. And remember to continue to choose bold.